Hey, Physics Boss Man coming back at you. And in this problem, we're asking that when a crown with a mass of 0.80 kilograms is submerged in water, its apparent weight is measured to be 7.3 newtons. And is the crown pure gold?
God's
help, you can do physics,
boss,
as you are created
You are created in God's image.
to be fruitful and multiply.
Fill the earth and subdue.
All right, so that's my crown I'm drawing here. Could be a little more intricate or better drawn than that. So the weight in pure water, so you can measure its weight by hanging it down on a string and measuring the force on the string. So the weight is 7.3 newtons is the upward force of the string that it takes to hold it up when it's submerged in water. And the general principle of physics is Archimedes' principle. And just to recall, Archimedes' principle says that the buoyant force that the fluid exerts on the object is equal to the weight of the displaced fluid. Okay, so to develop a bullet point plan to answer the question,
God has crowned you
you
with glory and honor.
honor to rule over his creation.
Creation.
And remember the question is it pure gold? We're going to compute the apparent weight if it was pure gold. In other words, there's two real approaches to this problem, and one of that you might think of is harder. There's an approach to the problem where you can take everything that you're given and compute the density of the crown that you actually have, and then compare that density with the density of pure gold. However, the approach is a little mathematically simpler. To assume as pure gold, put in the known density of pure gold, compute the apparent weight you would have using Archimedes' principle if it was pure gold, and then compare is the apparent weight what it would be if it was pure gold, and then use that to say if it's pure gold. So that's the approach that we're taking. And so we're going to look up the density of gold and the density of water. And then we can compute the volume of the crown from the mass of the crown, which we're given, and the density of gold. And then we can compare the resulting apparent weight. And W can stand for a lot of things in physics, but here we're using W to mean the apparent weight. So let's go ahead and let's draw another picture of the crown.
Science is a gift from God,
To help us master nature,
but sin added thorns and thistles.
requiring the sweat of your brow to succeed. Kind of a simple thing in our drawing. So we've got two forces on the crown. We've got the buoyant force, and then we've got the force of gravity equals minus mg, and that's before we suspend it from the string. So if the crown is just sitting there in the water, there's the buoyant force and there's the force of gravity, and these two are going to add together to give the apparent weight. Of course, one's in the downward direction and one's in the upward direction. So when we say they add together, because the directions are different, actually they get subtracted. So the buoyant force here is equal to, and this is where we're using Archimedes' principle, is equal to the weight of the displaced fluid. So the weight of the displaced fluid is the mass of the displaced fluid times the acceleration of gravity. And the mass of the displaced fluid is the density of water times the volume of the crown. And that's because the volume of the crown is the volume of the displaced fluid. The mass of the displaced fluid is the volume of the crown times the density of water. And then we multiply by the acceleration of gravity, essentially to convert the mass of the displaced fluid into the weight of the displaced fluid, which is the buoyant force per Archimedes. All right, so
Learning physics
often requires prayer
as we submit
to Jesus Christ
as
risen King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Since the density of gold is the mass of the crown divided by the volume of the crown, and we can look up the density of gold in whatever resource we like to look up densities in. But anyway, solving for this by cross multiplying, the volume of the crown is equal to the mass of the crown divided by the density of gold. Look up some things. This is 0.80 kilograms because that's what was given to us. And then the density of gold is 19.3 times 10 to the third kilograms per meter cubed. Punch the numbers in your handy calculator. And so that number is 0.00000415 meters cubed. Double check the units. Kilograms divided by kilograms per meter cubed. Kilograms cancels out. So 1 over meters cubed works out to be meters cubed. All right, so now the weight, or the apparent weight, is equal to the mass of the crown times acceleration of gravity minus the density of water, the volume of the crown times acceleration of gravity. I go ahead and punch those numbers into your handy dandy calculator, and let's go ahead and do it term by term. So the weight of the crown, if it weren't in water, just the mass of the crown times G is 7.84 newtons. And then you subtract this part here, which is 0.406 newtons. So that works out to be 7.34 newtons. So if it were, I'm sorry, let me go ahead and write this down properly. 7.43 newtons. All right, so if it were real gold, the apparent weight would be 7.43 newtons. The actual apparent weight is 7.3 newtons. So whatever the crown is made of, its apparent weight is not as heavy as it would be if it were really gold. So in essence, we determined with this calculation that it's not really gold. So what's happening here, right? The buoyant force is bigger than it would be if it were really gold, because its density is lower than it would be if it were really gold. It displaces more water. There's more of a buoyant force. So that kind of constitutes our assessment of what's going on here and why our answer makes sense. Now we want to be careful.
we reign by surrender.
We reign by surrendering to Jesus and praying for our daily bread, which includes success
In our schoolwork.
God will answer and lighten our yoke and the impact of the thorns and thistles in our labor. In our faith in Jesus Christ, that we don't get too enamored with the things of this earth and the gold. Scripture says that godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out of it. So we want to be storing up our treasure in heaven, is what Jesus says, rather than storing up our treasure on earth where rust and moth destroy, where thieves break in and steal. So it's an interesting physics problem, but let's not be too enamored with the shiny things. Let's set our hope on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.